so I just wanted to quickly talk about shading your sketch. So this is my sketch. If there's a way for me to get rid of that little icon there, and all I'm doing is showing gradation in each little section that I created. And I'm doing that by creating a circular motion with my pencil and then kind of fading it as I go out. And I might even create a little bit of darkness in my corners here too. So I'm asking you to just shade half of your sketch as a kind of a practice run, and that will also help me to check in and say, like, hey, this student really understands the project, has their technique down, or this person could work on this, this, and this before moving on to the final. Because shading is seemingly simple, but it actually requires, you know, some finesse and I don't know, kind of slowing down a little bit. So because this is a little bit of a darker value and I've gone darker in the corners here, I might want to do the opposite here where I start dark on my edge and then as I fade out I lighten up because I want to create contrast. So between each shape the goal is to create contrast and value changes. So within each section there should be a range of values. So as you can see, by controlling the dark to light, I created some contrast between these sections. And when I come to this shape, I also know that this part is dark right here, so I might also want to do the same thing. Maybe I have it go dark to light from here, right? Or dark to light from here. But I think what I'm going to do is actually start with my edge over here. So I'm also going to do a dark to light. So I'm really pushing down hard, and then I'm allowing this to kind of spill out, and as I move into the shape, I'm softening. I'm allowing the darkness to kind of carry around the letter a little bit. As I said before, you can decide if you want your letters or your objects to be a little lighter or darker than the rest of the shading so that you create some emphasis. Okay, so as you can see, I'm getting some contrast here. I might even throw a little bit more shading here because I feel like this is a big shape. You can always go back and darken things or lighten things. And I might even do a little dark shading down here. So I'm not going to shade half of this right now because it would take me too long, and you know, I don't want you to be watching me that long. I want you to be watching your own work and going through this process yourself. And hopefully this little demo gave you, if you were confused at all, it kind of clarified things for you. Okay, so there's my two sides are shaded. There's some gradation each of them. I'm going from dark to light. You can choose how you go from dark to light, if you want to do it from one side to the next, or if you would rather, you know, have it go from the middle out or from the outside in. So that's really up to you. All right, so again, I would shade about half of this. So in looking at this entire sheet, I'd probably shade to about there, right? So if you have finished that step, which it sounds like many of you have, you are going to move on to the final step, which is taking your final paper here. Sorry, I'm just trying to adjust my camera. And on the final paper, you should have a 1-inch border, okay? So I've gone around with my pencil and created a 1-inch border, right? So that you end up with, I think this is, just checking my notes here, yeah, 7 to 10 inch by 7 by 10 inch square. Okay, so I'm just going to write that out. 1 inch all the way around. Once you have gotten your paper laid out, you can take your favorite design and add that to your paper. Here's one that I did earlier. I used marker because I felt like it would be easier for you folks to see, but you don't need to be using marker here. Although I guess if you really wanted to, you could, but this is really a pencil project, so I'd like you to stick to the pencil. So I wrote out the word art on mine, and again, I outlined it so you could see it. And a few things I want you to notice. I have things going off the page, otherwise known as cropping. I have overlap happening with my letters. I'm using a variety of directions. This letter is kind of facing up and down, the T, while the rest of the letters are at an angle. And I'm really engaging all sides of the page. I have something touching really every single side, including my paint palette. So I drew out my composition, and then I went in, and this time I felt like I really want to use more organic kind of soft lines, so I went through and created lines going a variety of directions. I created 10 lines, so you should create about 8 to 10 lines, I would say. So I went through and tried to go multiple directions. I went diagonal this way, diagonal this way. I kind of had a sweeping line here, and the goal was to create smaller spaces that I will shade inside of. In terms of how big your spaces should be, there's no minimum in terms of how small they should be, but I would say you don't want any of them being larger than 2 by 2 inches. Like this one right here is probably the biggest one I have, and yours really shouldn't be much bigger than that, or else the shading isn't going to be as interesting, you're not going to be breaking it up as much, and you won't get that sense of abstraction. So for instance, if I look at this space and I say, you know what, this space feels a little too big, maybe I'll go in and break this up a little further, right? Think about where you're breaking things up to. I don't want to break it up right on the edge of this circle. So I might decide, oh, I'm going to go through this circle, right? I don't want to create an awkward touching point. So now I have made a smaller space. So again, nothing bigger than 2 by 2 inches. And even that's a little on the large side. So you might want to break it up more. I think you'll have more fun with the project and you'll get a more interesting end result, which is kind of abstraction and contrast.